For episode 10, we packed up and took the show on the road to Orange, California, where we interviewed the strength coaches at Orange Lutheran High School. We took a dive into how to drive excellence in the high school weight room setting. We heard from Coach Bubba Reynolds, Chase Sanders, and Ryan Nguyen. We're all three on staff full-time there at the high school. We got their insights into how to build a culture and buy-in at the high school level. We talked about programming, exercise selection, exercise technique, how they regress and progress athletes, and we talked through challenges they face at the high school level and what system they've developed to train all their athletes to be successful. Be sure to go to YouTube and check out the podcast practical that we did with Coach Reynolds and Coach Nguyen after we filmed the podcast. It took us through what they call their red band series, or their movement screen that they do in a group setting with all their athletes to teach different movement patterns in a group setting that bleeds into their upcoming programming, exercise selection they use within the training system that they've built. This podcast is sponsored by Speed Unleashed, which is an online digital platform for athletes looking to develop speed, quickness, and overall explosiveness. Welcome back to the podcast. Jared and I are really excited to be here in Orange, California at Orange Lutheran High School. So thank you guys for hosting us. We decided to make an hour and a half drive from Westlake to come and chat with these guys and just learn from them and see what they're doing here. So if you guys could kind of quickly introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background on who you are, and then we'll get into the discussion.
My name's Bubba Reynolds. I'm the director of sports performance here at Orange Lutheran. Been here a year and a half. Had the luxury of hiring two amazing assistants that have just kind of helped take off, with kind of all these ideas, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, my name's Chase Sanders. Again, this is like my 6th month here at Orange Lutheran. Quickly, previous stints, I was the head strength coach at Cal Poly Vermont for the last 7 years prior to this. And then I was at Utah State as a GA for about a year and a half. And then I was at Weber State University for about a year as an intern before finally making my way here.
Yeah, my name's Ryan Nguyen. I'm coming up to a year here at Orange Lutheran. I'm a sports performance coach here, and I started my journey as an intern at Stanford. I was at Arizona State. I was a GA at Valdosta State University. I was in the private sector, and I've known Bubba for about 3 years, so he hired me on here. Great. Well, I'd love to just get in, just for the listener, to get an understanding of where you guys are at, where we're at right now.
We're in my opinion, the best league in the country, in the Trinity League. We have 1,300 students, anywhere from 750 to 850 athletes, coming through here. So we're a predominantly athletic school, although, we're actually really art heavy as well in theater. We definitely kind of encompass the whole athlete. So it's basically, we're a really, really good high school program. We're, being in the Trinity League, you kind of, regardless of the sport, we're really good in a lot of our sports. Now, being really good in the Trinity League can put you in 4th place. So, you're looking at kind of some of that elitism in terms of, the Mater Dei and the Boscos for the football. But again, we're competing. We won a Division I championship, 2 years ago with football. As we're rolling into, we have Division I championship game for our girls basketball tonight. We have a 2AA championship game for our boys. Our girls just won the Open Division CIF championship in water polo. They're playing for a state championship tonight. Our boys just won a Division IV soccer championship on Thursday. So we're a very elite high school, but in terms of that thought process of where do we want to be, and we want to be in that Open Division across the board, winning championships.
So you could be a CIF champion but not win your league.
Correct. And
does that happen more often than not?
We got 4th place in the Trinity League in football, and got our butts handed to us, and then ended up winning a Division I CIF championship. Now playing Alamany, playing Sierra Canyon, it wasn't a gimme school, and you guys coming from LA know those are solid schools to beat. Yet when you're playing teams with 38 scholarship players across the board, you're going to need to do more than, you're going to basically need to play a perfect to kind of accomplish what you want.
It really helps in terms of our location, in terms of our demographics. Where we're at, especially right off the freeway here, we get kids from the IE, kids from LA, kids from Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, kids from down South County, Carlsbad, not Carlsbad, sorry, down in South County, really helps as well. So it's really attractive in terms of attracting kids from all over. So give us a sense of the structure of what you guys have set up. So are you guys all three here full time?
Yeah, we have 3 full-time, which is amazing in terms of a high school. I'm doing paperwork to actually get 2 more part-times to be able to put on, just so we can kind of be able to systematically break up our program and give our kids, honestly, what they need. We have elite level kids, will kind of take a place. We have a freshman last year. He's 6'6", 280 pounds, very solid athlete. He's also our starting left tackle, and he's an outside hitter on our volleyball team. So in terms of like, hey, that elitism of he's got offers from SC, he's got offers from here as a freshman, and then we have kids that are also 4'10", 87 pounds, lifting in the same weight room, and how do we lateralize that, and how do we progress like accordingly. And now that we've kind of been here for a longer period of time, things are starting to separate, the cream's kind of rising, for lack of a better phrase, but how do we actually give the kids what they need? Now, it's crazy to think that we have 750 athletes and you're like, well, 3 coaches is a lot, but it's still 750 athletes that we're trying to manage and give the best, product that we can possible.
So yeah, take us through just a typical day. Like how many, you mentioned 750 athletes. What's a typical day look like here in the weight room?
Yeah, so let's just take one of like our busier days. So say, for example, we have football in the morning. It's all hands on deck for football, just because there's so many things going on. We'll have a group outside doing all their speed work, their agility, change of direction work, whatever it is, be playing outside. Then we have a group on the inside doing their lift. We switch, and that's just like the first part of the day. And then right after that, after we're done with the football, it goes into, we'll have like a period 3 where Coach Bubba will take girls water polo, and then Coach Ryan will have a combined class where it's wrestling and track and field. That might be like an off block for me. We all get like a 1 hour off block during that kind of time off, but like it's not really time off because it's like we're working on hard projects. Like Ryan's in charge of the data, the social media. I'm in charge of our newsletter and then our shake budget. Bubba's doing all the administrative stuff. So like even though we each have an off period, we're still doing something the entire time. So again, they'll do that, and then we'll have a quick lunch where we quickly meet, and then right after that, we get right into the second half of the day where it's all of our teams are in here again, and then afterward we have after school stuff, and then we do all our meetings, and then all that kind of stuff. So from when we get here, we're all in here probably around 6:30, and when we all get out of here around like 4:30, it's nonstop the entire time. But it's fun. We enjoy it.
What I think is really unique about what you guys are doing in the high school setting is, and we talked about a little bit off air, some high schools, football is really the only team that may have the opportunity to get a structured strength and conditioning program in the weight room. There's a lot of high schools that some teams, they don't get any strength and conditioning time, and if they do, it's with their coach for just a small period of the year. Do you guys train every team here at the school in terms of every sport, or how do you guys kind of structure that? Yeah, we're very blessed and fortunate to have a block schedule system. So our periods are about an hour, 15, hour, 20, and we're able to kind of get a lot of kids into one block with that. So out of our 24 sports, most of them see the weight room. So I would say about 18-ish sports see the weight room. We'll have our bigger teams in the bookends, our period 1 and period 2, and period 7, period 8, at the back end, so we kind of get the before school stuff and the after school stuff. We kind of fill in the gaps in between, but we get a lot of sports in, so we kind of go through our sports that we have predominantly that we coach. I have boys basketball, girls volleyball, track and field, cross country, wrestling, and believe it or not, we have cheer early in the morning, and they get after it, and they're a good group. So those are my main sports, Chase.
Yeah, I got boys soccer, I got boys water polo, I got boys volleyball, I got all levels of girls basketball, and then I'll assist Coach Bubba with baseball, and I think that is what I have.
I'm predominantly over football, baseball, girls water polo, our softball, and our women's soccer program, and don't get it twisted. Like it's one of those things, like, it is a group effort. I am nothing without like these 2 guys. And I actually just left for 2 days and these guys took over the helm. So the respect, like, we basically have 3 head guys that are capable of running the show. which is also nice. Like, hey, do you have a staff that you trust to be able to take each team? And hey, Chase is gonna give me girls basketball, for the day. Like, we can all plug and play, and that's why the systematic pieces are so important to be able to, like, all right, hey, I'm gonna go speak at a presentation. Chase, you're gonna go to Connecticut and a conference. Ryan, you're gonna go to Art of Coaching. Like, hey, and then how are we coming back and sharing that information and being able to push not only ourselves, but also, give the best for what we have for the kids.
We have great support from our administration. So in terms of the class, it's called Conditioning APE, Athletic Performance Enhancement, and it's structured as a PE advanced level course. So then for us as essentially teachers, we have our own syllabus. We have great mentors and great coaches in NHSCCA. Is that right? NHSSCCA.
NHSSC.
It's just
National High School Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association.
So we have a lot of guys. We got to give a huge shout out to Gary Schofield, Rich Burnett, those guys to help us build out our syllabus. Where we can get into later, but like how our attendance structure works, how you get credit in our class, how to make up classes, how many classes can you miss, if you're late for a class, tardy your class, all that. So in terms of getting kids in, getting in their program. We established our standards early on in terms of, hey, like this is a real class. Like, this is not just an after-school activity. And kind of what you mentioned before, other schools don't have what we have. This is really supported by the school of like, if they need to get involved or students need to get involved, they're like, hey, how could I show up to class? Hey, you're about to fail this class. Like, you're going to drop this class. Like, what's going on here? We have full support of that in terms of getting kids in and following their program.
I think one of the main things I wanted to start with was, and this is just me personally, and Jared, you can speak to this, but one of the biggest problems I see in high school strength and conditioning and working with high school teams is building buy-in from the teams and getting kids to engage with strength and conditioning and engage with training. So what do you guys do to get your teams, bought in and to engage with the training plan or the training program here?
I honestly think it's kind of that Pygmalion effect of being able to set goals and set expectations and not allow kids to be mediocre, really. Like, I always feel like, oh, these kids have changed. I don't feel like these kids have changed. I feel like us as adults have changed in how we're holding our kids accountable and the standard. The cool part is when have the right progressions and the right systems in and get kids good at training and good at lifting weights, you like it. They're all good athletes.
Right.
We all like being good at something. And when you watch a kid go from a 12.5-pound goblet squat to a 95-pound front squat, like within the year, and it's like you watch the confidence build. We all want to do something we're good at. And I promise you, when you walk into the weight room, these kids aren't necessarily going to be great. Like I said, we have great athletes that pick things up really fast. We also have athletes that maybe aren't picking it up quite as fast. So, hey, how are we building the confidence and how are we holding them accountable every day? How are we having them as individuals holding each other accountable? Is at the same point, like, if you feel like you're rowing the boat by yourself, you probably are. So we hold our kids accountable in terms of how they're coaching, what they're coaching, and a lot of those things. And that's kind of helped to really set the foundation of what we're doing. When we got here on year one, it was a very painstaking process to really teach and implement our systems. But our kids coach better than 95% of the coach out there. Why? Because they only know how to coach one way. They know how to coach our way, which kind of helps us, right? It's like, I brought you guys in, you have your own way to teach squat, but our kids only know how to teach our squat, so I know exactly the cueing that they're going to use, the standard that they're going to use, and it's like, if they aren't doing that, then we can have a conversation. You're responsible for your partner for being a great teammate, but also safety and a lot of those kind of things too. It's like, shoot, this is a death trap for a 14-year-old if we really think about it. You guys got anything?
Yeah, I was going to regurgitate some of the information that you just said, Coach Bubba. And when it comes to the whole buy-in thing, I think there's a certain expectation, there's a demand that we expect from all of our kids. And we don't shy away from it. We definitely think like on campus, like, we really want to do the best that we can to hold these kids to a certain standard. Because like you said, like in the end, when they're in this facility, a lot of it comes back down to safety, right? Again, like one of the crazy things that you'll see is like we can have 90 kids in here. even if it's all three of us on the floor, that's still, the coach to athlete ratio is still insane. So again, I think coming here and just seeing the way we systematize the kids coaching each other is I think the game changer. Because in the end, even though they're in here, they're doing all their strength and conditioning stuff, it's a class, and they're getting graded for this class, right? And one of the things that we grade is obviously effort and intent and being focused on what you're doing. It's impossible for us to do what we need to do if we don't have the kids bought in and helping us with what we need to get done. So again, for example, like we could have, two kids doing on the squat, right? We have someone doing a front squat, someone spotting and coaching the entire time. Because again, we might be cadencing, we might be shouting cues out, but again, we can't see every single kid. We expect and we rely so much on our athletes to help us get the job done. And we always tell them, hey man, if you can coach it, it's gonna be a lot easier for you to do the movement when you go and actually do it. So again, like when it comes down to like building the buy-in, like when the kids are actually coaching each other, helping each other out, they're socializing, they're doing things that are completely might be outside their realm. It's really easy for them to get bought into what they're doing.
I think Bubba brought up a really good point in terms of it's not the kids have changed, they're kids, right? Like they're essentially a product of their environment. They don't know that they're changing per se. So as adults and coaches, like it's on us to change and adapt to them, right, in this generation. And we can't be like others and I guess baby boomers of saying, oh, it's the kids, it's the next generation, it's that. It's take ownership on us to be able to adapt and develop, right? So understanding that they're very, what can you do for me generation, in a positive way. It's like, okay, well, we came in, Coach Bubba's came in here as a director. He came from Orange High School, came from the collegiate realm of he was at Nevada, he was at Hawaii, and he's come in and say, hey, like, this is the places I've been at, this is what I've implemented, this is how I've adapted and learned and developed my systems. And then as Coach Chase has been a head guy at Cal Poly Pomona, built that place up from the ground up for the past 6 years. Like he's a system builder, a program builder, comes in with that credibility. And then myself, kind of be able, hey, I've been across the country, I've been at this place, I've been at that place, I've seen it at a great place like Stanford. Me being a Jersey guy, I've seen how Rutgers has done it. I've seen won a Division II national championship at Valdosta. I've seen how they've built the program there at that level. And then my main mentor at Arizona State, with Joe Connolly there. Like I've been able to bring a lot of different concepts there and then build that credibility of, hey, this is where I've been, this is what I've done. The kids have kind of like bought into like, okay, like they've come from a lot of different places. They know what they're talking about. I think as always, like winning cures all, right? As we continue to develop a culture and then we've seen it, our fruits for our labor kind of grow into wins. Each day we walk into work, we just see the kids just bought into this place even more and more. And it's been a fun ride for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you read like the typical NSCA book, the coach athlete ratio is like, I think 1 to 12 is like their guideline.
1 to 15, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of proposal. I think it's like 1 to 12 or 1 to...
It's like that guideline. But like what you guys talk about, I've seen it in some of your guys' videos of like, breaking something down and looking at the kids and say, hey, you are coaching this. And I think it drives leadership. It drives, a lot of different things. But you talked about like, you have some elite athletes. And then you got the 4'11 kids. That was me as a freshman in high school. But being able to like work alongside some of these elite athletes creates, again, some of that kind of togetherness. And, talking about, I guess, jump in a little bit of like the progression and regression you talked about a little bit. But like, what does that kind of look like from a grouping standpoint? From, what's the difference in the 4'11 kid or the kid that's not as advanced? He's, like you said earlier off air, was talking about, he just wants to be part of a team. He's, he's not going to maybe play in college. He just wants to be a part of a team versus the kid that's a freshman already getting USC offers and all that. Like, what does that look like from like a structure standpoint? I guess, go into a little bit of that. One of you guys.
Yeah, so Coach Bubba, this is actually kind of the first time I met Coach Bubba when he was at Modern Day. He was presenting on one of the NHS here. Gary, don't kill me. Okay. One of the Family Day conferences clinic, he was talking about his Red Band Block Zero program. So once again, the support of our class structure, every kid will go through our Red Band Block Zero program where it's just a red band resistance teaching or push or pull or hinge or squat, even core engagement, dead buck variations and all that. So they'll go through those progressions and that will take about 2 weeks. So 4 training sessions twice a week. Just being able to learn, okay, this is just the red band resistance. Can we hold this isometric hinge for 20 seconds? Can we hold this squat for 20 seconds? Can we row in a seated row position for 20 seconds? And then can we progress it to a 5-5-5 tempo, learning concentric, eccentric, isometric positioning of these movements. And then we could kind of talk and communicate to the staff, hey, this kid's ready for this, kid's ready for that. Hey, this kid needs to stay at the red band for another week or so. And we kind of divide and conquer in terms of knowing where our athlete's at and then breaking it up into who's progressing where with that program. But being able to start everyone at the same place is a big part of our first semester developmental period in August. And then we kind of communicate through there in terms of where kids are at.
Yeah. Originally came because even at Mater Dei, I'd have to coach 70 kids at once and teach 70 kids. So it's like such a different from a private sector where you're one-on-one and you could literally try everything. I'm like, all right, how do I coach 70 kids at once? What do I have 70 of? So something that kind of stem from that, but it also gets them, it's a very militaristic like thought process because, hey, we're all going at once. We're all, you're going to find out who's going to pay attention, who's not. Cool, we're on down on the ground. Cool, we're standing back up. We're down on the ground. Like, you need to listen to cadence, or even like in a simple, hey, like cat-cow, like, do they have any type of pelvic awareness? You're like, hey, he's going to be a problem, like we might need to stay in our dead bug, and that's where we're like, hey, our even regressions start. Hey, if a kid can't do a counterbalance squat, where do we go from? Well, he's got some neural problems, being able to control the spine. So, hey, we're going to take you to dead bug. We're going to kind of lick arms, legs, till you can actually get control over your pelvis and spine. So that literally might be the simplest regression. We might need to even take it back and kind of bring our ATs in, and we're like, all right, now we're going to kind of go into that FMS 4x4, to be able to think thought process. But yeah, squat's a squat. So one person might be a counterbalance squat. All right, you guys look pretty good. We're vertical torso, knees over toe. All right, you guys now are going to go to a goblet squat. Cool, we're going to run the rack and be able to kind of work through that. We're going to go to a hands-free front, but we kind of congruently built out a bare position to build out protraction and things like that to give them like a thought process and that comparison. Because there's a lot of things that the kids need to understand our cue system, right? If what we're saying makes sense to us and not to them. So it's like if I say half pipe and they don't understand what a half pipe is and to be able to kind of get into neutral spine. So it's almost getting the kids used to like, this is what I mean when I say this. When I tug the straighten your leg, this is what I mean, So it gives them some of the ideas because I think we go into coaching kids assuming prior knowledge. And for the most part, even if they were at your guys' facility, well, us saying something might be completely opposite. So we need to make sure everybody gets on the same page first and the proper verbiage is used, the proper cues are being used because, all right, we run at kids camp. I run it Tuesday, Chase. Ryan runs the next Tuesday. If we don't have that same systematic approach, these kids are going to be like, wait, Coach Ryan's told me it was this. So that's going to get us all on the same page is really where all the progression starts. You need them to stand up. And then it's like, now, again, what Ryan kind of touched on was, all right, now we're going to coach the RDL because, okay, you do it, you see it, you coach it, you're going to understand it. Because us as coaches, when you can really coach it, and that also, coach, it's pretty tough, right? We kind of take it easy on us when we're, like, it doesn't make sense, coach. You're like, how do I get him to? Yeah. So it kind of helps lead in the buy-in, but it's also that accountability measure. And it's also nice because if we have 50 kids in here and someone's rolled over on an RDL, they're like, Coach, I don't know how to fix this. You're like, cool, thank you for getting me because his spine's going to end up on the back wall if we don't, kind of touch and move.
I think that's a really good point because and the best teams that I've worked with are the ones that police each other and coach each other. So having that being a part of, hey, this is what you have to do, I think it's really important because, like you said, you can't watch 70 kids at one time do a squat. You have to develop that culture of coaching each other, which brings up another point of, and this is one that I always use, if you're going to coach somebody, you better be doing it right yourself, or at least have the effort to do it right because no one's going to listen to you. If you're telling somebody to do something and they're like, you never do that, why would I do that? You're a fraud. And so it kind of forces self-accountability, and which is what I love because then everybody's going to be on the same page because everybody, if you want to be a leader, you have to do the things right yourself or no one's going to listen to you. So especially in a football setting when there's so many guys, And I know you touched on it a little bit, but can you kind of give us a progression maybe with football on lower body strength development, what you do to get them to, the main movements that you guys do?
I mean, it's as simple as it could be. Like, we literally are checking kind of through that red band, body weight into possibly counterbalance or regression of, we're doing a lot of dead bug and a lot of like some of the DNS, and Ryan can kind of go into some of that kind of stuff. And then it literally goes as simple as a hands-free front squat. We might look at very long isometric stuff. One, to be able to kind of create tension, but two, to look at posture. And sometimes it's like they don't know what the bottom position is if you never. So are we building up, like parallel elastic component? Are we building up tension in that bottom position, or are they just passive? So kind of being able to create tension in that bottom position, and that might just be our warm-up sets, and then all of a sudden now we're, hey, yelling out tempo as we're kind of rolling through, making sure we're pausing and like solidifying that bottom position, top position, making sure kind of balance, because that's the nice part is hey, we're in this protracted position, internally rotating the ribs, which is kind of an aspect of what we want to train. So we're going to ride that hands-free for a while. We'll ride a goblet squat for as long as it takes. We'll ride a hands-free as long as it takes. There's not, hey, we would like to do it in like 2-4 week increments, but shoot, you're gonna basically be on a front squat. Ball's a little different because we'll probably get them off by the time they're done with season, all of freshman year, and then they'll probably progress into a back squat if they have control over their pelvis and rib cage. Ryan, you want to touch on anything?
Yeah, with football specifically, we kind of have our main non-negotiable exercises, right? I mean, our whether it's great DC blocks here, we have our front foot split squat that we have hands on hips. Once again, knee over toe, phantom upper calf, front heel down, vertical torso, and then can you hold that for 20 seconds? It'll take about 2-ish weeks, and then hey, coaches, are we ready for a 5-pound plate? They're going 5-pound plate, counterbalance, arms extended. Once again, are they hitting those positions? This kid might not be ready for 5-pound plate. Hey, buddy, drop the 5-pound plate over here. Then we kind of found a tweener where we get with this orange band under the armpit, hook the thumbs, they're learning tension, right? So going back to kind of like the generation of how does this help me become a better athlete? What does this do for me? Well, how are we teaching tension? How are we teaching irradiation? How are we teaching the application to athletic performance out in the field, the football? So we're constantly, if he's with the lineman and this is like a cornerback, like, hey, you need this to kind of jam a guy, right? Hey, you need this to kind of kick step and pass pro, right? You need tension to get this leg loaded, right? Front foot loaded, right? Front foot split squat, same thing, right, buddy? You got it? So then get in there. And then same thing with our goblet squat, right? So we'll go 5-pound to 10-pound. We have slant boards at every rack. So we'll start there, kind of see what ankle mobility, hip mobility that looks like. And then from there, we're blessed to have 35-pound bars at each rack. So then we'll go hands-free at 35-pound bar. Some kid, hey, had five on each side at 45 pounds. And we'll go from there. I mean, we have one of our top offensive linemen is currently a freshman. He's actually with Chase now on boys volleyball. He was on the same program. We knew right away, like, hey, you move really, really well, but you're still hands-free 35-pound bar with everybody else. Now we can add some more weight, and he's trusted the process, and he's still killing it, and he's progressed a lot faster than a lot of others, but still started at the same spot, same progression, didn't skip a step throughout his, 6-7 months here. And then dude's picked up some SSC offers and spiking the ball like I've never seen in my entire life.
As simple as that progression is to us and as logical as it is to us, I think a lot of, coaches who might be listening to this, they're a football coach who's in charge of their entire strength and conditioning program for the football team. So this might be super valuable information for them because maybe they've just put everyone in a back squat on day one and they're just expected to do it, which, to be honest, happens a lot and at a lot of places, but they just don't know better. So I think that's a valuable, just basic squat progression that is logical to, a strength coach, but to a football coach, he's never heard that or seen that. So I appreciate you guys going into that.
I mean, I think you got it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I think I think it goes unsaid, but it shouldn't. It's just like how important like the whole progression system is, and I think that's what made this place like really attractive. Talking to Coach Bubba and talking to Coach Ryan even before coming here, we're all very progression based coaches, and I think sometimes we get sometimes we might get bored seeing the same thing over and over again. and literally like he's want to get from one thing to the next just to teach something to be different. But especially in this setting that I've learned is you got to play the long game, especially when you're getting like a 14-year-old kid that's never stepped foot in the weight room. Like if this kid is going to be here for 4 years and we're training these kids at least 2 times a week, every single week, as long as they're in high school, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. These progressions can be very slow because in the end, we got to think about where they'll be at a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. And if the kid has the goal and the ambition to want to go play in the college sector, he's only going to be that much better when he goes. So that's why, like, when we do our progressions, it's like, it's nothing crazy. It's nothing extravagant. We're not going from, a counterbalance squat straight to a back squat. No, it's going to take a while for a kid to get to a back squat, and that's okay. Even if it takes a kid a year and a half, 2 years, that's fine, because in the end, like, training is a skill, and we're trying to develop these kids to get these skills to help them to where they want to go. So, and I think that's what we do a good job on, is we're not afraid to keep things for a while to make sure the skill is done the way we want it done. If we know we want to do like a front foot elevated split squat, it's gonna be like a KPI for us. Well, we'll do an ISO split squat until it looks correctly. Okay, cool. Now we'll goblet load it. Okay, cool. Now we'll contralateral load it. Okay, we want to load a little bit more. Cool. Now we'll finally go front squat. Maybe we'll go back rack. So again, there's like 8 million progressions that we can get through, and it needs to be small. And it's enough to keep the kids engaged. Because in the end, like, these kids need to be like kept engaged. So yeah, they might do like an ISO for a while, or like a goblet ISO or a goblet split squat for a while. Just putting them in a contralateral load after a couple of weeks, it's exciting for them because it's a different position. They get to hold a heavier weight. So it's just a good way to keep the kids engaged and continuing to group the patterns that you want without throwing the kitchen sink at them.
Let me add a little caveat for the viewers and kind of all the high schools.
Talk to them, bro.
It's not all sunshines and rainbows, all right, guys?
Talk to them.
Early on, you'll find yourself for a whole hour just counting numbers. And I think Coach Chase and I have learned a great deal from Coach Bubba, who's been doing this at high school level for a while. Like, we'll literally, for a whole hour, you got a stopwatch. You're figuring out who's partner 1, 2, 3, and 4 for your rack. And you're just screaming out just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, partner 2, ready, 5. And it's just like, it's the most exhausting.
And we're not coaching out hot for it.
And for a whole hour, you feel like the whole work day, and you got to do it all over again. And we would literally just, for like, after I got a lunch break, we'll just be like, oh my God, that was just exhausting. We just bond over that as staff. Just how difficult it is in terms of just getting kids on cadence, like what Bubba said, in terms of the military style of making sure everyone's doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think is the big piece of that is what you're touching on is the 4-year development, is going through that. Now, one of the things I would question, I don't know if you've had experiences, I'm sure you guys have, is that's the way, the lens that you look through it, and it's a very simple and effective lens. What happens, and maybe it's a challenge that you guys have faced, is when a kid trains somewhere else maybe, and they jump right into, they come from here where their movement looks really good, so all of a sudden the coach is loading them super heavy, whatever, they come back to you and say, hey, I was doing a 315 back squat, why am I doing a 95-pound front squat? Is that a challenge you guys face? And could you dive into that a little bit? Because again, like, our viewers are probably some young high school strength coaches that are going through this that might just say, I don't know how to have that conversation, so I just let the kid do what he wants to do because that's what his trainer's been having him do.
Guys, you guys can touch. I'll finish it out.
I mean, I definitely, I've been in the private sector for about 3 years of my career. I vouch for the private sector coaches. I vouch for, our field's great, man. Like, we've all seen every aspect of where this field can take you and all the settings. But for that, it's kind of, once again, our principles are non-negotiables, right? Like, what makes this place great is the vibe, the camaraderie, the accountability aspect, and just kind of the environment that we create. So the kid comes up to us and hey, coach, I do outside training. Hey, I was doing this back squat at the other facility. We just have those probing questions of like, okay, well, like, why are you doing that? Like, how'd you feel after doing that workout? Do you feel like you're recovered enough from that workout? Do you feel like you're getting stronger? Like, the more questions you could ask the kids, they'll kind of, answer it themselves, right? So when we probably have this every other day, especially with our football program, hey, coach, like, I'm at this facility and I did that. I'm like, well, did you ask your coach, like, why'd you do that? Like, did you ask yourself, do you feel like your numbers are getting better? Do you feel like your movement's getting better? Do you have knee problems? Do you feel, twitchier outside on the turf? Like, how do you feel? And then if they could answer that, then we can kind of dive into more probing questions. But if they can't ask the basic question of hey, did you ask for question your coach or your trainer, why'd you do that? And they can't answer that. Well, it's like, hey, like, how about this? Go back to your private sector facility, ask them why, what's the reason behind the program, come back to us, and then we could try to go into further questions. But if they can't answer that, then we can't dive into that. But I mean, we could go into more of the other aspects, but in terms of like nutritional stuff, the mental side of things, like, are they training in that aspect too, or is it just strictly physical, rah and bigger, faster, stronger? Because I think a lot of aspects with our field is missing the boat on those realms, and I would love to build we would love to build relationships with all the facilities out there in terms of, hey, like, how are we holistically developing your guys? And then how can we collaborate further in terms of, hey, are you touching on the nutrition stuff that we're not touching on? Are you working on specific goal setting with like their agility times or their speed times and all that? And then how can we continue to further progress the field in those ways?
So this is kind of a new area for me because, again, in the college sector, like, or the college setting, it's just like the kids were always training with me. So, and they were with me 3, 4, 5 days a week, and they're on campus, and they don't really have access to really go anywhere else. So the only time, like, they would go and train at their, with their other coaches was during the summertime, which I told them, like, hey, you guys see me for 10 months out of the year. If you don't want to do the summer stuff, hey, go do whatever you want to get a little change of pace. So this has been a little bit of a different avenue for me when it comes to, like, they have their training here, but also, call a spade, most of these kids are training elsewhere. So it's having to combat that. Now, what we hold, we really take pride in ourselves is we want to we think we give these kids the best possible service. And that's the goal that we're trying to accomplish. We want what we're doing here to be so good that, hey, you don't need to spend the extra whatever to go do the extra training. Like, put that towards your nutrition or whatever it is else that you got to do. But like, we want this to be the best possible service you can get. And again, hey, if they're going to outside sources and the coaches are great, like, hey, keep doing what you're doing. But like what Coach Ryan was saying, like, we're trying to make sure we have whoever it is that you're working with, like, let's just be in communication with them. Because in the end, these kids are already doing enough stuff, right? There's a baseball kid, hey, they got a pitching coach, they got a batting coach, they got a fielding coach, they got a strength coach, they got a speed coach, they got an agility coach. It's okay. It's a lot of things to kind of keep a hand on. So, okay, let's just make sure we at least have the communication amongst everyone. That way we're not, doing this kid more of a disservice rather than anything.
I think it really, for us as coaches and me maturing, I think early in my career now, I still get frustrated with some of the aspects, as I'm sure I get frustrated with everybody, is really who we are as coaches, right? Are we transactional coaches or are we transformational coaches? I feel like when we build the relationships and we have those relationships with our athletes, I feel like the more I've gone in, the more I've invested in the relationships, the less my kids go out to other facilities. Like, they only want to train here. Like, we know them the best. So it's really like, hey, what relationships are we building with our athletes? They come in and talk to us. They come in to us for life advice. Like, that's why we got into coaching. That's probably why all 5 of us got into coaching, because someone made an influential piece in our life that changed us for the good, right? So it's really, one, the relationships we're creating in here, but it's also the education. We're teachers. This is a class. Like, even if you guys look at the board, we talked about total work and progressive overload. And we talk about recovery, where it's like, guys, if you're 14 years old and not getting better every week, like, you're not recovering. So it's like, hey, what are you willing to trade off? If you can make all that work and still be able to kind of like recover and do all that stuff, then you're doing enough. But hey, like, maybe let's look at some of these things, like in terms of even progressive overload. If we're increasing our total work each week, then we're improving, right? So how are we educating our kids on that? We have Fun Fridays. We educate them on sleep, educate them on nutrition. We educate them on hydration, and we track it in our iPads. So they know how much water they're drinking, how much sleep they're getting. Oh, I slept 5 hours. Well, we know what the repercussions are from sleep kind of things. And the private is not going away. Club's not going away. So let's stop living in that world. And hey, how can we work together, guys? Sometimes I've reached out to coaches and they've been phenomenal. Other coaches, not so much. It's like, oh, I trap our deadlift well. We are also trap our deadlift. Guys, no offense, I can't change individual aspect. Like, this is your team. So it's like, hey, let's reach out. Let's like, we're going to cover the bare bones. We're going to be so generalist, inch deep, mile wide. Like, hey, guys, I don't have a Proteus in here. If you're going to do some rotational power stuff because of baseball, like, awesome. Like, let's get that done. Hey, if we're going to look at some more minutia in terms of, like, specificity and really, like, your batting coach and your hitting coach, like, hey, how can we add on? Maybe let's look at taking maybe some of that money and adding it to meal prep. It's like that, 'cause nutrition, calorically, like, you're 145 pounds dripping wet. Like, can we invest maybe in our nutrition a little bit? You know, maybe you don't need to work out 9 times a week because more is not better. Better is better. So it comes down to that education, all that kind of stuff. And we want to work with people, man. Those are other people's work and how they provide for their families. I'm not going to go knock other places or anything like that, but it is a very frustrating kind of topic. But we can all work together. We can make super athletes because there's so many more touch points that we actually have an opportunity that if we work together rather than being like, oh, this is mine and letting ego get in the way, then I feel our field is really going to take a step forward where it's not mine or yours, it's ours, and let's make everybody better. There's enough meat on the bone. Everybody's a pretty multi-billion-dollar business in terms of health and wellness, especially in Orange County.
So this kind of touches on a different topic that I wanted to dive into with almost athletes, multi-sport athletes, right? Perpetually in season is almost where they're at, right? Especially, kids that want to do multiple sports, which I totally love and suggest to offset sports specialization and things like that, which is a big problem with youth sports today. But how do you guys deal with multi-sport athletes? Because I'm sure that's a big challenge because you might have a football player who's involved in the strength program in the winter, January, December, and they may be running track, they may be, still in soccer season or whatever. That's a big challenge. How do you guys deal with that?
This is kind of one of those kind of challenging aspects, but in high school, everything's in season. Going from AAU to high school,
Exactly.
like they get, 2-3 weeks off the entire year?
Exactly.
Like I know when I was I'm like, I don't want to see you in August. I need you missing this place. Like, so there's a lot of avenue, like, hey, when we train very minimal. We're training just enough to kind of like move the needle. Now, shoot, in season is actually when we make our biggest gains because we actually control all the variables. It's like we've had a kid increase his back squat by 100 pounds in season in the Trinity League. Like I would say 95 to 98% of our kids are increasing year round, but we train twice a week. And then how do we, again, handle volume? Like we'll just take football and like our track kids will. Hey, for the most part, like our morning days are heavier loaded. Now we are very like acceleration focused. We're doing like body weight, sled pulls right now, heavy sled pulls. Like I know we're trying to counteract what they don't get from a track and field. I don't think they're going to do a body weight, 6 plate, 300-pound body weight sled pulls, and then even in the afternoon, cool, they'll have their upper body lift and then go to track. So we're trying to be able to kind of maneuver. Now, the cool part with what we do with football is we actually we have a combine in 5 weeks. So we're very, again, linear focused. And we've kind of, all right, hey, we're going to try to get these kids as fast acceleration. It matches really well with track season. So our emphasis in kind of the weight room and what we're doing mimics very well to all these other sports. So football's kind of like the one that has the true off season where it's like water polo's like, hey, we're very like 3x6, 2x5. Like it's not like a ridiculous amount of volume. And then I actually just presented on this the other day is we have an athletic block. So we're kind of almost running very extensive plyometrics. We're looking at building, motor pulls and things like that to hopefully counteract like cross under run, crossover run, hip flips, shuffles. We're kind of almost building motor pools, and with some of our water sports, it's something that they don't even get. So, hey, we're spending probably half of a block outside doing basically an athletic block to increase again motor pools and coordination and all that stuff. Here we're doing crawling, tumbling, things like that, things that they don't get to help counteract a lot of that early specialization that we're going to see. It's like, how do we make these kids better athletes? Not football players, not lacrosse players, not water polo players. How do we make them better athletes? Because we're hopefully 98% of our kids won't see probably a college field. how are we actually developing those kids, to, again, be better people, but also like just live a fuller life, just live a fuller life.
I think to that, great kind of transition segue of kind of how our topics have grown, starting with the culture and the buy-in, right? And then the relationships that we've developed, with the credibility and kind of everything we've talked about of what we're able to offer to these kids. As we've developed those relationships, we can kind of tailor and our programs to be like, hey, this day is more of our mobility kin stretch focused day. Like, hey, we're game day -2, game day +1, game day lift, game day -1. This is how I'm going to change it up. So we'll kind of point those out. Hey, we're game day -1, so I took out a set here. Hey, I dropped the volume here. Hey, I added this extra 90-90 hip mobility exercise for you because I know you guys got the game tomorrow. It's like, okay, coach has got my back. Like we're good. We're taken care of. We do game day lists with all our programs, and we're able to kind of educate them on the importance of game day lift and then what we did to the program to continue progressive overload, but then also make sure their body's taken care of that day. But then also on our Fun Friday, Education Friday, our last talk was on in-season training. So in terms of the education piece, we'll talk about residual training effects. We'll talk about compensation effect, transfer theory in terms of that. And the kids are really able to be like, okay, like one, obviously they know what they're talking about. Two, they have my best interest at heart. And three, like they know that, hey, it's more than just about sport. It's about athletic development of, hey, like, is my body still primed, ready to go to move for my sport? And they really take care of me. So we definitely take pride in holistically training. So we'll add even more meditation, breath work stuff. We'll teach them about how their diaphragm works. We teach them about the importance of mental health and all that. We'll spend almost 20 minutes, 30 minutes doing that. I just did that yesterday with my beach volleyball athletes. Like we did that first. We threw some med balls, maybe did 3 sets of squat, and then we're out, right? And that's in season. So we're able to touch a lot of different aspects in 40 minutes, and they're really like, coach has got my back. Like, I trust him, and relationship continues to grow in that.
And maybe you don't deal with this, and maybe you do. And maybe what would you do in this situation where a coach, maybe a baseball coach, is telling their player who is in football workouts, don't do this, don't do that, don't go, whatever. But you're trying to send the message, hey, we want full attendance. We want you to be here, at least be here with us. I mean, how would you deal with that? I'm sure a lot of coaches deal with that.
I can kind of speak on it. We don't actually really deal with it here. Our coaches, now the proof's in the pudding, right? It doesn't, if you don't win and you don't produce and we don't do any of that stuff, but it's like, nothing's like having a coach in here on week 12 a season and they're just like hitting a 90% like it's butter, or that they're smashing out, chins going into playoffs. And like we have kind of that credibility with one. If you look at our history, it's like, hey, we have credibility. Like we know where you want to go and where are we lacking. And again, it's educating coaches, right? Everybody feels like their way is the best way. Like you're not a leader if you don't really feel, but you also have to kind of have that same level of humility. Our water polo coach is a 3-time Olympic medalist, but she understands that I know my job very well, our football coach, but it's one of those things like, what's our relationship like with our coaches? Like, I know every one of us is in our coach's office at least 2 to 3 times a week, just chopping it up, creating an environment that's like an open and honest. And hey, I'm totally, we're struggling here. Cool. I'll back off in this. We'll see how this works. Like, what are you willing to change? And, we're not stubborn. We want what's best for the kids. And that's kind of that oversight. And that comes from our athletic director down. Like, shoot, we have the support. Now on the other side of things, like, you kind of just have to ebb and flow with the coach. Like, it's kind of their program, and hey, I'll take with what they say and still be able to kind of produce, product what they want. But we also have to think that second order thinking and not just what's right in our face. It's like, well, that's fine. They might be a little tired now, but where do we want to be in 2 months from now? Man, baseball's killing it right now, but we've kind of had to back off and kind of doing all that stuff. But I know our coach's schedule, hey, we actually have all off next week. So we're actually going to rebuild some volume and rebuild some capacities because we don't want to win just now. We want to win 3 months from now. So it's what's our plan, showing like, our our tentative plan for the season, how we're maneuvering and manipulating, going in and just knowing a coach's schedule. Guys, you guys have a game on Tuesday and Thursday. Here's what I suggest. Here's what I think that we should run through. I know you guys have a game late Friday. I would like to get a little bit more high intensity. We could back that out of practice. You can talk to a coach like that, and you're like, that guy's part of our team. That guy's part of our staff. I trust that guy with our kids, you know? And sometimes that takes time to build. The nice part is, hey, we haven't been a predominantly winning school, so sometimes we're looking for that avenue. Nothing's like, oh, you go to a 3-time national championship team and you want to change some stuff. Good luck. You're going to have to kind of earn the trust of the kids. Because most of the time, for me, like, I talk to the kids. I say, what do you guys want to do? What do you guys feel great with? Here's what I suggest. You know, you're giving them options, giving them autonomy. You're okay with both options. Hey, if we do this today, then we're going to have to train on Thursday. Are you guys okay with that? Yeah. I talked to our senior class, and those kids are driving the culture. Those kids, nothing like your senior class going and talking to the head coach like, hey, we want to train. What's that coach going to say? No. The kids drive the program. So if you have that buy-in from the kids and the trust from the kids, you have the buy-in and trust from the coach. But if you have that disconnect, dude, they're going to get pulled out 24/7 all over the place. And you're going to be trying to keep it to yourself at the end of the season going like, so as people start breaking down and you start getting like little wonky shoulders, a hamstring or something like that, you're like, told you so. But I think it comes down to the culture and the relationship we have with the kids. I mean, I'm sure these two.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if you provide value, you get results, and you're really good at like communicating with coaches and players, you can get, as a strength coach, you can get kind of like what you want, right? And again, like in the end, you got to get results. Like that's the biggest thing. You got to be able to prove to your coaches, your sport coach, that you're getting results. And again, I have a team on campus, just to real quick, is just, you know, if you know anything about the sport of soccer, especially boys soccer, you know, it tends to be called like the finesse sport. They don't want to be in the weight room too much, blah, 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 whatever it is that you want to hear. Again, though, like this is a team that hasn't had a lot of success in recent years, and we're at a really tough conference for, you know, where we play. But the guys were getting results. They were verbalizing like things they were feeling. Coaches, you know, sit down with coaches. They're telling them, hey man, we're feeling this. We're looking like this. Like we really like what we're doing here. And it's like, hey, and most of our lifts fell on game days. And it's like, well, during the season, if half of our games are on lift days, like we can't just not do anything and miss half of our training weeks during the season. So again, it was one of those things to really like show the importance to these coaches, like, hey, importance of game day lifts, and show to the guys like, hey man, like we're gonna lift on game day. We're gonna train like we normally would during the in season, and it's gonna be, you know, we're gonna do 4x1 trap bar deadlift. We're gonna build it to about 87-90%. You're gonna hit it for 4 singles. We're gonna do some chins and some single arm dumbbell bench press. You're gonna be done in 30 minutes. There's your lift, and you're gonna go out and play a soccer game. And guys are just like, hey man, like we felt great. Like they felt like it didn't take away from their program, and it still allowed us to keep certain metrics up. And it went back to like what Coach Bubba was saying about football. Like we have to train during the in-season. Guys are putting on 100 pounds on their back squat, and we're not doing a lot. But the consistency and the buy-in that we get from the coaches and the players when they see the results, and you're able to provide that value and that data to the coaches, it's really easy to get what you want and continue to drive the needle forward.
And I think in the high school realm, that's relatively easy because the training age is oftentimes so low. So it makes sense to do that. It's just the logical thing to do. And so to your point about just the relationship with the coach and then educating the athlete, then you can really make change and drive change as a strength coach, which I think is important.
I think we're so grateful and blessed to have student body here is phenomenal. Like the kids are so smart. Like the kids here at Orange Lutheran, they're very academically driven as well. So they're really smart. We don't give enough credit in terms of that. So if we're truly in it for the kids, like we got to give them autonomy, and we got to, like what Coach Bubba says, is you got to give them the choice, and they'll usually make the right decision. So even with boys basketball, like I'll almost like give them like a menu, like, hey, you can do this, this, or that. Like kind of pick your poison, and I'll give them even a weight range. Like, hey, like big guy, you could do either 225 to anywhere 265. Choose your weight, and they'll usually choose their weight like really well in terms of where they're in season now. And I got to give my guy Corey Schlesinger a huge shout out here, but it's very kind of that microdose approach of, hey, this is your menu, and you could choose that, you could choose this, and as long as you're hitting those parameters, you're good. So I have like a program where one guy's busting out arms because he wants to hit arms, and then our point guard's like very anti-armed, and he's over here doing hip cars, and this guy's over here doing you know RDLs or trap bar deadlift for here, and they're still hitting what you're wanting to do, and they usually make the right decision. It's a fun process.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that you guys just talked about right there is, and you touched on a little bit earlier, our earlier question is training the human being. And I think a lot of coaches try to, like what you said, transactional, or what was your other word?
Yeah, transformational.
I think a lot of coaches, even from sport coaches in clubs, think that their way, the way they do things, is the best. I've seen it in my sector. I work with a club soccer team, and the transition between club soccer and high school soccer. And there's like a 2-week period where they're still playing club soccer, but also doing high school. And you look at two coaches, that the high school coach is doing 5 a.m., 4-mile run and this and that. And then you try to talk to the club coach and say, hey, they're destroyed. Like they don't need to do anything. And then this club coach say, oh no, what I do is better. We're going to do hard, all this stuff. And like what you're talking about is the 14-year-old that's not progressing. It's like they're just so overworked. And so if you break it down and look at the human and try to have a relationship with the human being that's in front of you and what's best for them, I think that's where this industry can go. And what you guys are talking about is like a big part of what appears what you guys are saying, is that it's all about the human being and what will allow them to perform at the highest level. Because like you said, you know, if you go and talk to them and they say, hey man, today at pitching coach or skill coach, I got destroyed today. Maybe it is something you got to change for your session, because you know it's like if I trap bar you or do something crazy, like you might just be shot for a couple of days and you can't play in your game. But I think that's a huge point for, you know, younger strength coach people listening, is that you really got to focus on the human. Your program's not any better than anyone else. What you're doing is it's what's best for the person in front of you. I think is the underpinning thing on it.
What some advice do you guys have for a strength coach who does not have a resource like this? I mean, this is a very unique high school weight room. I mean, it's very, very unique. I would venture to say this is probably in the top tier of weight rooms in the entire country. You know, California for sure, and in the entire country. So, you know, what's some easy progressions or exercises even, or exercise selection or exercise order that a strength coach can use who doesn't have 18 racks? They don't have 3 sets of dumbbells. You know, what's some advice you can give to a coach in that scenario?
It's easy to say, but you gotta stick to your principles and what you know, right? And what do you hold? Like, what do you stand on? What's the hill that you're gonna die on? And then be really good at that, right? So, of course, like your main movements, your squats, your hinge, your push, your pulls, like what do they look like? And if it doesn't look like that, like how can you get there? What are your implements? And then what routes you're gonna go? So we'll obviously give huge shout outs to like our FRC principles and those concepts of like every kid here knows what 90-90 looks like. We say get in your 90s, like they know what to get into, right? So then we'll have our base level like foundation of, hey, this is how your hips should move. And then from there, our level 2 stuff or our next progression of our 90s here. Now we're learning the difference between internal, external rotation. Because once again, what do we reverse engineer from? What does your squat look like? What does your hinge look like? What does your push look like? What does your pull look like? And how can we get there? How's the scapula moving? How's the shoulder moving? And we can go from there. And I think what we get caught up into is the fancy stuff, right? So like in terms of like speed progressions, right? Like, are they really good at hitting their positions? And if they're not, then be really diligent in terms of that foundational work of hitting your acceleration, hitting your postural work, hitting like, okay, what does your arm action look like? We might stick at arm action for 3 weeks because, hey, like that's your missing like piece that's limiting your speed, right? So, you know, we do a really good job of making sure like the foundational stuff, like, hey, we know what these look like. We got to hit those positions before we move on to the next. But to kind of answer your question here, tempo work, being able to be really diligent with your cadence, with all that. I think the isometric world is really blowing up with the Alex Montero stuff, like being really good at like owning those isometric positions and how can you load those up, using those different implements with, like I said, FRC concepts. That's your best bang for buck. Like I think we've said it many times throughout this podcast of leaving meat on the bone, right? Like if these kids, their goal is to go to college, you know, strength conditioning, college athletics, like, hey, if we get the most rotational capacity, joint capacity, like they're understanding what isometric loading means, then hey, like their college strength coach, like they could hit the positions they want to hit all when they implement their techniques.
I think another thing too, and I feel like it's pretty simple, but is don't be afraid to reach out. Like if you find someone in the game that you feel provides value to what you could potentially do, And you got to be able to like, A, reach out, B, if those coaches or someone has a price point and you think it's going to provide you that much value for your situation, knowing you're limited, pay that person what they charge hourly, and then just talk to them for an hour, like, hey, here's my situation. Here's what I got. Here's the student athlete body that I have. Here's pictures and the layouts of everything. Like, I just need like a general framework of maybe how you might go about it. And again, that can give you a lot of bang for your buck, even before going down the X's and O's. But because in the end, if you don't really have a reference point to work off of, it's going to be really hard to create something, or you want to build something. So again, being able to reach out and not being afraid to reach out, and not being able to be afraid to put money into your education if it's going to provide you value on the back end, especially if you're trying to start your place up.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. There's 5 people right here that if you reached out to, we'd be glad to help anybody. You know, being part of the NHSSCA National High School Strength and it's for coaches just like that. It's for, hey, you're a science teacher, you have a family of 4, you coach football, and you don't, hey, like, this is what we do. If you look at our weight room, like, this is what we do, you know? So again, reaching out to the right people and having, you know, taking the time and doing all that stuff is super important. Getting part of an organization and, you know, like, we'll give you answers. I'm not going to give you research articles to help you delve into, like, the NHSCA is to give you answers. It's not to necessarily like, hey, I'm going to guide you. It's like, nope, I'm going to literally be like, go that direction. Here's the flashlight. Like, I'll help you find your way. Second thing is your warm-up. If your warm-up isn't flawless, you are not holding your kids accountable and all that type of stuff, it doesn't matter what you do in here. So if you're not willing to spend, I remember my first time like taking football, we did 10 3-count jumping jacks, and we made it more complex I think we did jumping jacks. Now I was a little nervous. I was getting fired with calf rhabdo, like right out the gate, because they probably ended up doing 900 jumping jacks. It took us 45 minutes, but I wanted it to be perfect. Every one of our teams does 10 jumping jacks, and it is perfect every single time. It is a locked-in drill. We are locked and loaded because it's a commitment. It's some of those things. So it's like, what do you have instilled in your program where it's like, hey, if you're not behind the line, well, all right, guys, behind the line. Cool, they're not behind the line. Are you going to continue to go about it, or are we going to start over? Every one of my guys knows every football session, regardless of the time of the year. I've made kids do up downs on game days, like for being late. Like, what is your standard across the board? Because kids, like, that authenticity and you holding them to that standard, regardless of how they feel, what day it is, game day, anything, they respect you for it. It's the kids don't like inconsistencies, as we don't like inconsistencies with our athletes. As simple as that. Inconsistencies in our relationship, nobody likes that. So it's like, if your warm-up's not spot on, they're behind the line, they're turning the right way, all that stuff, I will spend 5 weeks. That's the cool part about high school, had that long. College is a little bit like, hey, they need to be ready to practice in 6 weeks, so it kind of stresses you out. Should we have 20 weeks? I'm going to I don't care if it takes me 4 weeks to get this warm-up. I don't care if we even go inside. What is your standard? Set your standard, set your expectation, and the kids will reach it. And then it's not, oh, we're starting over. Oh, come on, coach. And then the kids start doing it. We got kids. I got 2 kids at the end of mine looking down the line. I don't even have to do it anymore. They're making callbacks. That's how we're, again, building leadership, building autonomy. Those are some of those things kind of, to kind of move on. I think it starts with your warm-up.
But what does that warm-up look like? Take us through just a typical warm-up.
So, I mean, we call it an athletic block. I actually, again, did a presentation this weekend in terms of, like, one, that's smart. Stop calling it a warm-up. And, even talking to some of the strength coaches for, like, the Rams and the Jaguars, they're like, hey, we have this small window of time to develop athletes. So even as we kind of start our progression, like, hey, we'll start, simple, hey, we're just trying to build body temperature coordination. So, hey, we're going to do skip, backward skip. We're going to progress that into, hey, a skip for distance, skip for height. As we're kind of looking to build some of the complexity along the way, hey, cross over run, cross under run, a forward karaoke, backward karaoke. How are we actually building skills within like our kind of like our heat temperature warm up? Like, I'll tell you right now, like, watch a kid do a cross under run and watch how like that motor like is. So for the most part, like, you cannot haphazardly go through the warm up. Like, it is challenging. Guess what? If you don't do that warm up properly, you're off to the side entire running session, you're going to work on that skill till you are able to get it. Again, don't just not care, but it's again, hey, how are these kids flipping their hips? Because what these over specializations, we don't see that anymore, right? So are we going to build some of these skills? And then as we start to get closer to a spring ball or start to get season, like, all right, hey, like we can load crossover run. We could load with some of these patterns, but are you going to load a crossover run that is bad? So what kind of skills are we building within kind of that, basically heat, like that warm-up progression? And our warm-up takes about 12 to 15 minutes. And we kind of go into our mobility where we look at kind of like single joint to multi-joint, almost starting to kind of like look at some fascial line type of stuff, a lot of rotation aspect, just to mobilize, give them a little bit of break. Very like, and let me back up, like shout out to Zach Dakin, and his like 3D warm-up prep. It kind of helped with the design. And then Scott Kuhn, in terms of like his progressive. Now we've kind of made it our own. And then we kind of go into, hey, a low-level plyometric progression that's literally bleeding into it. It might be, we don't even work through snap downs. We look at position, isometric position, and then build into a snap down, then a single jump, double jump, triple jump. And that might literally take 12 weeks. And hey, are we looking at our split jump and our single leg landing, and how are we kind of prepping that? One, because we're increasing our nervous system to be able to do higher outputs of our sprints and all that stuff. And then we're just building low-level plyometrics, our rudiment series, our complexity as we're kind of moving along. And hey, how does this look from an in-season model to a postseason? And we're hoping to kind of like let our football coaches and our coaches keep going with this warm-up, but it's like, hey, let's build skill. I'm so sick of watching an NFL guy do a haphazard warm-up. It's like, what's the point? He thinks, what's the point? Like, what are we doing? Why not take that time, take that 15 minutes and develop a kid in that 15 minutes rather than going through some crap that he can. But it's like when you forcing that brain to think and forcing that body to react, and then, hey, how does this cross under run help me? Well, offensive line guys, do you pull? Okay, like you're going to cross under run. Hey, how many guys get knocked off balance and you're running under and coming off line? Like, hey, is that going to help you guys? Oh, 100%. Like, how does this kind of look in your game? Because we know even like a basketball GPS data, it's like 73% of the game is done non-linearly. We're not developing some of these capacities and this athleticism, over specialization, because you watch these kids struggle. Believe me, we practice. We're down here, like it's you watch us practice, like, Coach, how are you good at this? Because I worked at it for 3 months before I even did it. Like kind of some of those things. But
to add to all that, I mean, also give a shout out to Bobby Stroop. He's presented at a national conference at the NHSSCA.
yes,
There we go, in Nashville last year. He kind of opened our brain up into like, once again, kind of like the 3D vector system stuff. But yeah, Scott Kuhn's his template. Definitely shout out to that as well in terms of what was like $20. It was like such a great investment on us. But he gives us a detailed approach in terms of, hey, we got to touch these points. So to kind of Bubba's point, like it's not a warm up, it's more just movement competencies, right? Like we're filling gaps that they're not getting elsewhere, right? So by all means, we would love to teach like bounds. We know how to teach bounds. We know how to teach a switch. We could do boom booms and all these cool speed stuff. But we're also, we take pride in, we're teaching crawls. We're teaching crab walks. We're teaching more of the combative stuff, like how to roll, right? Whether it's like side rolls, forward rolls, dead bug rolls, different variations of that. Where it's like we know they're not getting this stuff outside of here. So it's like, how can we fill those gaps? And also on top of that, like within 12, 20 minutes, because they're inside here. And to kind of also answer your question about warm-ups, we have a general warm-up for every single team that comes in here in terms of the weight room and our strength training. So it's the 90-90 hip lift and rotation. Shout out Joey Berglis for that. Obviously Vernon Griffith as well, like kind of really blowing that 90-90 progression as well. But the 90-90 hip lift and rotation, 5 reps each. We'll go prone, single arm, shoulder axial rotations, 5 reps each, and then split squat, hands on hips, knee over toe, hamstring cover, calf, 5 reps each, and then we'll build off that. So that's like our pre-algebra, our basic playbook verbiage that we use, and we're able to expand on that. So in terms of our FRC stuff, our mobility stuff, we can be, hey, remember 90-90? Hey, remember shoulder axial rotations? We're progressing that to half-wing shoulder cars. Our split squats, we're able to load that here, and we're able to kind of make that to a lateral progression now, and then go from there. So every kid knows those 3 movements when they enter this weight room.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing you said is that it's the term warm-up is like, I don't think it should be out there anymore. Because if you go to any club, high school, and you see them do a warm up, it's basically like a time for like the kids to just like talk and goof off. And if you don't set that up from the beginning of like, the training starts with a warm up. Because what I see a lot is you go through a warm up of 20 minutes and then you go into training and it takes another 20, 30 minutes to get warmed up, to get the tissue temperature up, all that stuff. And then you only have, you know, your situation, you only have 10 minutes to train. And that's like a huge piece to people is like, spend the time on the warm up, build skill. We've talked about a lot on this podcast of, you know, even putting in some like sprint training and things like that in the warm up actually is a huge piece to, you know, just to use your time. Because what you guys have, how much time do you guys have with the team?
75 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you guys also have, you know, you're saying you got outside, you got inside, so you got to be really efficient with your time and how you guys are using that. So that's huge.
I think Ryan Howard posted like this viral tweet a couple years ago, and it was about the warm up. Yeah, and he put like, "Hey, I have my warm up for this long, and we have this many sessions throughout the year," and it was like some crazy number of hours that he had. And say, "Hey, if we wasted, we're wasting hours and hours and hours of training." So like the warm ups,
It was like 58.7 hours
yeah.
a year that you spend time like doing warm up between all your practice sessions. Like we get them twice a week, but they also, how many times do they practice? How many times do we all that stuff? So our goal is to really have this integrated model with all of our coaches. Like, hey, how are we, again, building skill? I think people are like, oh, he's just not good at that. It's like, how have we helped him build that? We talked about that with leadership. You're like, oh, they're just not good leaders. Like, what skills, what opportunities have we given them to lead? Like, guess what? I've been an adult for a long time. I haven't met very many good leaders. I can count them on one hand of like, dude, that guy was just a phenomenal leader. I thrived underneath him. But it's like, us as leaders tend to like not be great at some of those aspects. So it's like, we just expect a 14-year-old to just like, you know what? You need to be a leader, but we're going to give you no knowledge, no opportunities, and not really help you and hold your hand through this whole process when, you know, it's just crazy to think about, you know, some of the things that we are asking of our kids, but are not necessarily giving them the skills to be able to do it or to be successful.
And the culture you guys are building and that leadership is like in the warm-ups is that, you know, I'm sure some of your seniors can just take a football warm-up at this point because you've taught them how to do it. They've done it so many freaking times that the football coach technically doesn't need to learn the warm-up. It's just, you know, you got 15, 20 seniors that are like, hey, we're on it. And they could go through the warm-up that you guys have standard.
Our young kids do it as well.
Yeah.
Like we lead jumping jacks. It could be a freshman. It could be a sophomore. Like, hey, you need to be ready. One, because it also gives the seniors a break. Because sometimes as a sophomore, you just don't understand. You're like, cool, get out in front. You're going to fail. And that's a good thing. But at the same time, next time you get to that jumping jack line and you're going to do it, you're going to stay locked in because you understand what it's like to be under 104 people trying to lead a jumping jack session, and you're trembling under your voice and things like that. And it's like, it was your opportunity. Remember that, because you're not going to get off that spot till you do it right. I'll put you up there every single day till all of a sudden, and then you're going to ask for the support of your teams not so nice to them in kind of this past. So it's just great opportunities for them to learn and fail. So
I guess that leads into our last question for you guys is, and Coach Bubba touched on it off air a little bit, is the simpleness of, you know, quote unquote, simpleness of high school training and programming. So I guess my last question is periodization for high school, important or no?
I think it's important. We run a very linear periodization model. I think it's just not getting too complex too early. If 2x6 works and is moving the needle, we don't need to do all these complexities. Like I see these high schools doing, hey, like we're going to do triphasic or do something like that. It's like, yeah, but as soon as you start utilizing those adaptations early, they're not going to work as well later. So giving them something before they're actually prepared for it, and that comes down to base principles. We talked about individuality, specificity, like, hey, that's not going to work for everybody. Now, hey, we do have layers in our program where we might have, again, like a front squat, a back squat, a chain back squat, a banded 1 and 1 4. Like, hey, like some of these kids are ready for these things, but hey, we run a super easy linear model, you know? And I do think, yeah, like, hey, undulation, but undulation is not going to work for everybody in your client setting. You're going to leave out the bottom 10%. Our goal is to look at that bell curve. Hey, you have your 10% that are fast adapters. You have, 80% that are going to be in the middle. If we can make the bottom 10% adapt, the other 90 are going to take care of themselves. So, hey, if we're doing that in 2x6, then all of a sudden hey, we talked about, one of our athletes, like going to Pac-12. And then I give them to coaches that actually have all those implements and are ready. Man, the response they're going to get from that, because I checked my ego when they were in high school about giving them actually what they need rather than what I want. So I do feel like, yeah, periodization, I have the entire 4 years planned out. Now my exercise selection, but some of the training percentages and auto reg that we're doing, but I got all 4 years, basically what I want to see. And when I walked into this room, and talked to every football coach and every baseball coach, and my first question, and, this is like a Tim Karen, type stuff. It's like, where do you want these kids to be in 4 years? Because I don't care what you want them like in 12 weeks, because that's just not what we're going to do. Tell me what you want these kids to look like in 4 years, and let's develop a plan to be able to get them where they need to be in 4 years. And whether they go to college or don't go to college, they have a foundation. And I think we talked about uniqueness, and it's the anti-uniqueness, but the amount of education we give these kids, nothing's like talking to a parent. They're like, yeah, somebody came back from college who's majoring in kinesiology, and my daughter is 15 years old, is talking about principles of individuality and complexity and why, parallel elastic, hey, we talk to these kids in a very simplistic manner, but they understand. We give finals and we give midterms depending on, hey, what's the retention rate? There's no grade for it, but we actually want to see what you guys have learned. We offer, performance club. Like if they want to get more into the weeds and being able to give them opportunities, because again, we're teachers. So I think the uniqueness is in the amount of education that we give. They don't care. I don't know. I think they do. And I think they're starting to figure out themselves a little bit more, because I was like, cool part about the human body, it's you. It's not going to change. That you learned about you, and I'm sure everybody that's like X phase, you're like, this is rad. This is cool. Hey, or you're running and you feel like epoch for your first time. You're like, I know what's going on. Or so it's just you kind of watch some of these kids geek out, and you know who's going to become that strength sports performance coach, even though we're like, right, don't do it. But it kind of.
Man, I feel like you guys are like a college coach's dream, because I think we've all probably had a kid come in on the private sector, at least. Like I've had seniors come to me and say, I've been training for 6 years, and then you have them do a squat, and you're like, there's no way you've been training for 6 years. But what you said is you're equipping the kids to, when the kids that do go to college, they could go in that weight room, and that strength coach is like, money. You could do all these things perfectly. Now we could play around and do everything that we need to do, and that's huge. I think that's missed a lot, because I'm sure you guys have had kids that maybe have transferred in or something like that, and they're like, oh, I've been doing this and that. They do your red band series, and you're like, wait a second, you haven't been training your training age looks like it's zero, but
training age is huge, right? And I think in terms of it depends, and kind of the multifactorial layers of question of periodization. It depends in terms of, one, the training age, and two, how long have they kind of been with us, of the system and terminologies, where it's like, I would look at Coach Bubba's girls water polo team, and they are so far beyond other sports because it's a smaller group, right? And they've kind of been with Coach Bubba for a very long time. Then I see my track and cross country, where it's the first time they've ever touched weight in their life, right? So to kind of truly answer your question here, our phases here in high school are typically a lot longer. Everything you read in textbooks with 4-week phases, 5-week phases, we find ourselves 6, 7, 8-week phases sometimes. And we're like, hey, we're not going to test you until 12 weeks from now, and we want to make sure we have 2 really good phases in to really know that you know it, and then we'll finally test your broad jump and vertical jump, trap bar deadlift and all that, where it's hey, we'll spend a whole semester on RDLs if we have to, because your training age is so low. But then I look over here, and he's doing kettlebell arm bars, and I'm like, what the heck are you guys doing over there? It's because it's they've been here for a longer time.
So, Coach, you mentioned your benchmarks or what you want to see at 4 years. What are some of those specific examples?
It's tough because every kid's different. And we talk about principles and I guess move efficiency and competency, right? I mean, I know it's, super subjective, but at the same time, it's hey, you move well, and hey, you're hitting good benchmarks, hey, your scap's moving around your rib cage and your push up, you actually understand where your pelvis is in space, you're not sagging through your torso. Hey, again, we're moving, bars at good speed. We actually know how to spot, know how to, like, that's just, again, like some of the retention rate, because I think it's just quality, and it's tough to define quality, but we always say, hey, if you come, and we talk this to recruits, if you come here, you're going to be ready to play college. And I'll spit it out as examples, like, hey, some of our baseball kids, like Luis Rodriguez was reverse lunging 295 pounds for triples. He's starting at TCU as a freshman. Like, Carson Bowen was our catcher, did everything we asked him. Well, we had him for a year, but we had to break him back down. And it's like, you're walking into Zach Dakin's program, and I'm like, I just want you to surpass his, like, level 0. Now, I know you're going to have to go through, but I want you to kill it. I want you to be respectful of it, but I want you to kill it. And I'm like, both of them are starting at TCU. It's like, hey, when you leave here, I want you to be able to compete as a freshman from a mental standpoint, maturity standpoint, emotional maturity, EQ, IQ. We talk about that all the time. It's like, hey, those are, like, you have an avenue of being able to go out there, and nothing's like, Coach, I went into the weight room the other day, and I knew what I wanted to do. Like, win. Like, I don't know. It's like, we want to see stuff.
As soon as I moved conference, it feels big the same thing. Like, in the end, like, yeah, everyone is their kids, trap art down there, garage jumper, flyer tens, boards, all that stuff. And it's all great. But like, when we see a 14-year-old freshman, boy, basketball player, or even like a girls lacrosse player that never thought about in a weight room doing what we have them do, by the time they leave here as seniors, and you see like day 1 to year 4, like them just able to move like an actual human being and do it with load and do it properly and be able to coach the crap out of it. Like, that's for this setting, high school, those are like, that's what we want. And even like when we give our final exam, like we give these kids final exam in the end, it's a class. And like, we have questions like, what's a 3-1-1-0 tempo? Where are you spotting the dumbbell bench press? Like, our definition of what a chin-up should look like is, what is it like in the description? What is it supposed to be like? And again, it's a survey for us. It's a survey for us. Like, okay, are we teaching what we hold dear to our heart and we consider like our main principles? And is it sticking to the kids? And like, if it is, sweet, we're doing something right. But if it's like kids are missing a lot of answers, or we're not getting a lot of good feedback, okay, well, we got to go back to the drawing board and try to reconfigure how this thing.
Yeah, so the easy KPIs that we'll have, especially on our player profiles, is your broad jump, 10-yard split, 20-yard split, 40-yard split, trap bar deadlift, front squat, all the chin up, whether it's a weighted chin up, a chin up hold, how long can you hold a chin up for, all that. We want to get the bench marks of 1.7 times body weight basketball. Those are the easy stuff to talk about, right? But I think they've kind of hit the points in terms of what really truly matters. We'll have other coaches come in and ask about what do we do with the ball force plates. It's really easy to talk about the concentric stuff, and we can see what Joey Burglas is doing down in Texas and kind of systems he built out and a lot of the concentric KPIs. But what we see with the ball force plates more than anything is how well they're able to eccentrically decelerate. Whether it's the braking forces, your deceleration impulses, those are actually are increasing a lot faster than our concentric stuff in terms of RSI, concentric impulse, peak power over body mass. Like those are a little tougher to achieve, and we understand that. But as long as we're truly filling our buckets of eccentric and isometric loading, like we see them able to drop down into positions better, and then we could really tell them, hey, this is improving your athletic performance in this way. And then hopefully, as I said before, like we know where we want to take this, and then we'll continue to reach out to Joey in terms of, okay, like, how do we get more power? How do we get more concentric impulse? How do we get better RSI through that? So we can get deeper in the weeds with the force plate stuff. At the end of the day, I think that's way like, down the line, or more so at the other end of the spectrum that we kind of keep, tabs on. But like, more importantly, just, are they in attendance, compliance? Are they loving the environment here? Are the parents coming up to us and telling us, like, man, you've changed our kids' lives? Like, you can't put a number on that, right?
Forgot where I saw this, but again, I think the biggest KPI is attendance. Like, in the end, like, if you're not here, like, it's hard for us, especially if you're only training 2 days a week and your attendance is not good. It's gonna be really hard for you to like make the improvements. But when you see a kid that, hey, because we got to take attendance, and we know how many classes kids have missed, and the kids who are here working their butts off here every day make the most improvement. Ones who are here aren't making improvement. It's not overly complicated.
Well, I think we should end it right there. I just wanted to, say how much we appreciate you guys hosting us here and you know, giving us your time, and you know, we really value you guys' time. So really appreciate that. And then can you kind of plug your Instagram so that coaches can go on and kind of follow you guys' journey?
Yeah. Instagram guy here. My personal Instagram is Coach Ryan Nguyen, RYNNGUIN. Our staff's Instagram handle is Olu Performance on Instagram as well as Twitter. And then as an athletics department, it's Olu_athletics on Instagram.
Yeah, my coaching Instagram is at chasing_strength7. And then my Twitter, honestly, I don't know my Twitter one. I think it's Coach C Sanders, something like that.
Yeah, mine's Bubba J Reynolds. I don't really post a lot. I just basically repost all the stuff Ryan does. Ryan's the brain. You know, I always say, hey, I'm kind of like the front wheel, kind of guiding everything. These guys pedal the bike, you know, so.
We're currently working on a contract for me to complete rebrand his Instagram. I'll get to a point where I'm just posting for Bubba, but, you know, we'll get there.
But it's going to be quality if he has that.
All right. Yeah, the reason I mention it is because if you guys go on and look at what is OLU Performance Instagram, you'll be blown away by what these guys are doing, which is why I wanted to come in and, you know, just get an inside look into what you guys are doing. So I appreciate the content you guys are putting out. And again, thanks for your time.
I appreciate you guys.
Awesome.